Hi, welcome to Thinking Green. We are not live today, so no call-ins, but we're taping this on Tuesday afternoon because we just can't do the evening. So I'm really happy to be joined today by Eddie Long, who is, as you know, was our Green Party mayoral candidate this past election season and is co-chair of the New London Arts Council. So we'll be talking, well, I guess about the merger of arts and politics.
Sure.
So welcome, Eddie.
Thanks for having me back, Rana.
Well, you know, I'm trying to get to all the candidates
Sure.
one at a time as part of a debrief, but partly talking about just how the city can move forward.
Sure.
So before, during, and after election season, you've been very involved with the New London Arts Council. So do you want to start out by talking to that?
Sure. A little bit about what I've been up to. And I like the way you phrase that because I had this deer in the headlights moment, just a day or two after the election. And somebody walks into my job, and before they could say hi to me, they walked right up to me and they said, "So what's the next step?" And I was like, give me a second, So yeah, it is about the next steps. Art is always infused into all the steps I take. So, one fun thing that I did that I just want to mention in passing recently, before we get into all the New London stuff, that the Mystic Lighted Boat Parade was not too long ago, helmed by the Greater Chamber the Chamber of Greater Mystic. And just an awesome event, and this is the second year in a row I've been asked to MC it. So as the boats come down the street or down the river, I'm able to call them out, and there's thousands of people in attendance. It's a really fun event. But getting back to New London, we actually can start pulling up some slides now. Very involved with the Arts Council, have been since its inception. As a co-chair, I get to oversee a lot of the projects we take on, but my favorite part about being in the Arts Council is certainly hearing from the arts community. And so we have, in New London, we just had our tree lighting ceremony as well. There's a slide for that. Organized by Barbara Neff largely, and a lot of volunteers downtown. There's Kia Baird of the the Cultural Commission. Both very, very prominent figures downtown, both very, very big supporters of the Arts Council. We're very grateful to those two. And the organizations that they helm. The fun thing that we did in New London this year for the tree lighting ceremony is the local artists were asked to paint Christmas tree ornaments. There's two of them there. I chose some that I know I can give credit to the artists on. This is Kathy Diaz. I can't pronounce her last name.
Yes,
I can't really see it.
or something, yeah.
But that's our New London Public Library. You can see the artist who did the ornament to the right is me.
Oh.
That was my little contribution, just a little winter scene. And then the next two, that's Wormo from a very popular artist downtown. One of the contributing artists that runs the Annex. And I chose these two not just for the artists' names. The second one is SFVA, Sarah Falman Flores Visual Art. Also a contributing artist to the Annex, and she happens to be the arts counselor in charge of visual arts on the NLAC as well. But I just wanted to show these two examples because there was an option for businesses to sponsor some of these ornaments as well. So I wanted to show you the full picture.
Do you mind if I go non-sequential for just a minute?
Sure.
You mentioned the Annex, and I see you are wearing a shirt that says New London.
I sure am.
And merchandise that says New London on it. It has been an issue. It's a tourist town, in
Yes.
addition to many other things.
Yeah.
And it's hard for people who visit to find any kind of memorabilia.
Sure.
So I don't know if you want to talk about where that's going
Yeah.
from here, but
Sure,
you are
sure.
wearing
I
the
mean,
shirt.
no, that fits right into the conversation. So what you're referencing here is the famous New London, and so many New Londoners are familiar with this brand and support this brand. It was started by New London's own DJ Frank Lowe, very popular character downtown. but also a very important contributor to, frankly, our economy and our identity. He really is. A supporting founding artist to help get the annex off the ground is he. Very active DJing to this day. But he does have this very prominent clothing line. You know, a lot of the students wear it. Lots of people downtown wear it. We see politicians wearing it. And yeah, to go back to what you were saying, I would want nothing more than for the annex and more importantly the artists that they support to be well known for the products that they make that say New London on it. I know that there is some efforts now being made to sort of strengthen that connection that those artists have to the city, and what I mean by that is getting the city to do more to prop them up. Because they're artists that work to pay their rent and to feed themselves. And there is a way to help them by directly connecting them to our tourism agency or our tourism industry. And on the Arts Council, we do everything we can to help that along. And one of the best chances we have at that is our New London Cultural District. The New London Cultural District Commission works very closely with the city. They have money. And so I know the annex is trying its hardest to work with the city and see what way forward they can take to make that happen, to make the annex a little bit more of a sort of tourism destination. It does seem like we're focusing on one store, one entity, but it cannot. We can't forget that what they're doing is facilitating a way for local artists to sell their work and to contribute to our society, to our community. So that's a great thing, you know, that's a great thing.
Well, I'm thinking back to when you were first on the show, maybe 3 years ago, even
78,
3.5.
1978, I think that was.
But you were talking about how many of the businesses downtown have, connections with our arts community.
All of them.
And it is pretty much all of them. Mm-hmm. COVID didn't help.
No.
So I think, we're kind of in a rebuilding mode.
Right. So what I hope, because there's always stops and starts. We're always familiar with the stops and starts. There's always grand ideas, and then they kind of, there's just, I would say this, and we're going to get to this subject. This is a perfect little segue, because I did run for mayor, and one of the biggest things I was concerned about was lack of creativity in the leadership, and of course follow up on some of the more important initiatives that have been instituted to prop up our arts community. They throw a lot of things at the wall, but the follow-up is the most important. And it's okay to not expect something like a city council to be able to always know how to run some of these programs. So that's why we want more presence in the, in the city government for the artists, for the art community. The Arts Council fights for that every day, and the Cultural District, again, is a good start, because that is a quasi, government agency. But it's expected to have artists on its committee, on its commission. So those things are coming along, but the lack of creativity is very concerning to me, because we see that there's always going to be, well, I shouldn't say that, but right now there seems to be quite a bit of money that the city can throw at issues. And that's fantastic, but if the money is just thrown at the problem and there's no direction, there's no creativity, again, and of course there's no follow-up, then what's the point of even throwing the money? Hold on to it, and figure out the smartest way to spend it. And that's why I said this is funny, the transition, because I know we're going to talk about the campaign. Not too long ago, at the Lyman Allen Art Museum here in New London, we had a ceremony for state recognition to be given to some of our local artists. These were people who ran orchestras, people from theater, visual artists, people who design marketing for breweries. This was writers. This was all sorts of different artists that were receiving recognition from the state. And we were happy to be a part of that and help get that off the ground. We thank State Rep Anthony Nolan. He was giving out the citations. But here's a personal anecdote. while I was there, I remember while I was giving my remarks, this was so long ago too, while I was giving my remarks, talking about the importance of, supporting our artists in every way that we can. We just simply cannot call ourselves an arts and culture hub and profess that that's the thing we care about the most if we don't always keep the artists that make it work front and center. And just mentioning something to that effect, and then the next person to speak after me was Mayor Pasro. And he did go out of his way to mention that ideas are good, but you gotta have money, and it elicited a little bit of laughter from the room. And I'll be honest with you, I think it was my Donald Trump moment. You remember where we all watched Donald Trump just sit quietly and eat all the jokes that Barack Obama was throwing at him, and then he just went off and ran for president? That was the same thing. I remember thinking, I fundamentally disagree with this premise, that so long as there's money, everything's gonna be okay. That is wrong. It's wrong, because money's thrown at problems all the time, and they don't always get solved. Nationally, state level, of course, and here in New London. They throw money at an issue, but without the creativity, the ability to follow up in a meaningful way, who cares? Who cares? It's just a news article with a lot of zeros in it if it's not ran effectively. And so I kind of held on to that. Because it started to make me realize that's actually what we're up against. That we're up against a ruling class who believes money is always going to be the issue or the solution. And if they believe that, then they're going to always go where the money is. And sometimes that means right into the hands of developers that don't really have our city's best interest in mind, but we'll get there.
Well, it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking about how those of us who live in New London do take for granted that it's a pretty arts-rich community, but in some levels, and it isn't a new issue, it predates Mayor Passero and
Sure.
Mayor Finizio, and back in 15, 20 years ago, I remember when I was on the Board of Ed learning about the Hot Schools program, where teaching artists go into classrooms all over the state to teach concepts through the arts. And several New London artists participated as teaching artists in the program. Darren Wood did, Lana Burton did, Mark Patno did, but the New London schools did not participate in that program.
Interesting.
Montville School, and I'm talking, 15 years ago maybe.
Yep.
So it was just, really interesting to me that so many of the participating artists were part of this program, which did cost school districts some money, but not an arm and a leg.
Right.
It was something that a district could choose to prioritize. And New London didn't. The old Edgerton School, I believe, did have the Hot Schools program. And then when Edgerton School was closed, it was never picked up anywhere else.
That's a good point. Finding ways to spend the money and convincing the municipality that sometimes the things that we see that the money should be spent on, although they can't understand it, they should listen. They should really listen. I'm talking again about the artists. You want to find ways to put money directly into their pocket, and so going back to the annex, that seems to me like a good way forward, because it could be a constant, cycling or rotating door of ways for artists to get in front of a bigger spotlight. It's very important. But yeah, that's where the steps started to take, I was not always thinking that I would run for mayor, but that is something that I held on to, that interaction, that realization that our ruling class thinks money is the be-all and end-all. And I ran so that people who feel that money is not always the solution can have a little more representation, because I just don't see that in our city government, that thinking. This is not there.
Yeah, just to live, there is an amount of money that you need, and then at a certain point, it's not necessarily helpful to quality of life. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and then just there's just so many different ways you can poke a hole in that, in that logic as just the only way forward, because then it can lead to corruption, right, and waste. Waste, obviously, you throw too much more than you need, that is waste. But I mean, when there's extra money swishing around and somebody decides they want to help themselves to it, is everybody aware? I still want to know how much that whale mural costs. I don't know all the numbers. I've gotten some answers, but I want to know more. I want to know more because I think I deserve to know more. You do too. The city does. It should be wide open. I shouldn't have to go on, excuse the pun, a fishing expedition to find out how much a whale wall cost.
So I guess at this point we can talk a little bit about your campaign and
Sure.
how you felt about the process of the campaign and how elections turned out in New London.
Yeah, well, the next slide, I believe, is for the campaign, and it is me parents. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the highlight of my election day, was standing outside of Nathan Hale and seeing, I'm a public figure, right? So this woman is peeking her head out of a van, and I know she's taking a picture of me, and I'm thinking, whatever, I don't care, whatever. And then she gets out of the van, and I'm like, oh, it's my mom who lives in Georgia. So that was a great.
And they hadn't told you they were coming.
They had not. They had not. So what a great surprise! And then they stayed in town for about a week, and we got to visit with the kids, and it was a really, really, really nice surprise. Yeah, very special surprise. My favorite part of the campaign, the next slide will show you one of my favorite parts of campaigning, and something I wished I got to do more, was those more intimate interactions with the voters. I'll say first, it's validating. It's validating. We're there to service the voters, but I got something out of that too. That what I'm thinking is right. It's close to the mark, because when you sit in these different homes in these different neighborhoods in front of these different faces, and hear the same thing, and what they're saying is what's written on my notebook in the form of things I want to mention. It starts to make you feel good about what you're doing. And I really wished I got to do more of those interactions, just because I like to have those one-on-ones with folks. And that's the point too, is it's not always about soaring rhetoric and speeches. You have to get down and communicate with voters one-on-one, and I enjoyed doing that. I really, really did. And my other favorite part would be the next slide, which is a chance to interact with the youth in a very meaningful way.
Oh, okay, that isn't the next slide. Well, let's swap. Yeah, thank you.
It is.
Oh, it is.
It is.
Okay. I
So
thought the bad news was the
No.
next
So this
slide.
this particular image was great. This is a group of students from Cannes taking a tour of the downtown area that is led by New London Landmarks. So obviously we love New London Landmarks, all the great work they do. But this stuff is important, It seems like it goes without saying, but it doesn't go without saying. It needs to be mentioned and nurtured, this importance behind connecting our youth to our history. In in Connecticut, we aren't seeing this issue too much. Up in our region of the country, we aren't seeing this issue too much. But let me be clear, my history, your history, our history is actively being erased right in front of our eyes by people who hold legitimate power. Not radical groups, not people that we can ignore. The most powerful people in the country are actively trying to erase my history, our history. And so, an organization like New London Landmarks, working overtime to bring students into those conversations is very important, because we have to arm the youth with this information and the knowledge that it's so important to know that information.
And New
That
London,
when they hear people try to,
Yeah.
dismiss it, they can push back and say, don't dismiss that. That's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah, having followed New London Landmarks for like over 20 years, about 25 years, it is interesting that they've taken many different issues and directions, but over the last decade, they have really done a lot to focus on the erased history. Even when I think about zoning issues, some of the programs that they've sponsored about, how our housing in New London got so segregated and how black ownership was pretty much destroyed. They've done a tremendous amount of research on that, and of course, there's the Heritage Trail as well that they were participating in.
Sure, and that's a good point to bring up, because the Heritage Trail is such an important. It's art related as well. Those are pieces of public art, but you can learn from them, and they highlight important figures, events, places from around the city. And that's keeping history alive in a very cool way. You can go and take a picture with it and see it and touch the history. If we're talking about not being able to hear about something that used to happen, the idea that there's something you can go and touch to connect to that is very, very important. It's not something that's performative, particularly because that organization also, has other efforts to do this work as well. It isn't just things you can see there. Like you mentioned, really, really doing the work to keep this stuff alive and to keep the youth involved. And youth involvement, to tie it back, is also something that, if you are in the political arena, should be at the forefront of your mind as well, because they're the future and the next generation of voters and all of that stuff. But you don't just want to approach them and get them to vote for you so that you can have those numbers. You'd like to instill in them the importance of civic duty and, giving a little bit of yourself to your community wherever you can, when you can. And so, turnout is an important thing.
Yeah, so what was frustrating to you, and I see we have the slide about voter turnout, so we can talk about what the numbers are and what might have contributed to those numbers. So I must admit, I started putting these numbers together before this most recent election, partly to debunk the charge or the criticism that minor parties detract, steal voters away from the major parties.
The opposite.
And when I looked at our mayoral races in New London from 2011 through 2019, that really wasn't the case. The number of people who voted for the Democrat or the Republican running for mayor in all three of those elections was pretty much the same number, about 3,250. I mean, it varied by like less than 10 votes for the major party voters. However, the total number of voters varied by more like 1,500, and those extra votes had gone to the other candidates on the ballot.
Right.
So we saw that the additional candidates, or I think we saw, they drew voters who might not otherwise have felt motivated to vote for anyone because no one really voiced what was important to them.
Right, which was them. It starts with them, making them feel like they should be a part of the process, which starts rhetorically and of course must be followed up with action. But you have to first communicate to the disenfranchised voters, to the jaded voters, that the reasons that you feel jaded and disenfranchised will be addressed, that they're not forgotten. So, come on board with us as we take this on. When you run for office, there's lots of stuff going on, but there's two major focuses when it comes to outreach or voter turnout. You're trying to do two different things. There's voters that are inactive in the city. The first thing I was trying to do was make them understand that they should get back involved. And I know why they're not involved, largely. They feel like their opinion doesn't matter. I can't tell you all the reasons they feel that way, but I know that must be a part of it. Because you took the time to register to vote, and then you didn't act on it. Would you fill out a job application and get hired and then not show up? Why'd you do that? You had something to do. You signed up to do it, and then you stopped.
And it was a one-day job.
And then, yeah. We need about 20 minutes of work from you, depending on the line. But it's important to point out that they did sign up for this. At one point, they were excited to engage in this process. And something happened that changed that, right? So it obviously is something to do with the leadership and then the policies and then the way things are going, and then they decided they're done. So a change in leadership would be needed. So again, there's two things you're trying to do. There's inactive voters you're trying to reactivate, and then, you're also trying to get the active voters to maybe change their mind. That if, they're going to show up, they care about the way things are going enough to participate in the election, but you don't want to just believe that they are going to always vote the same way all the time. And I can accept that because I'm an example of somebody that always thought they were going to vote one way, and then, I've reached a point in my life where I realized that doesn't have to be the way, and I also don't want that to be the way. So you're doing two different things. You're trying to change some minds, but you're also trying to reactivate folks that have kind of stepped away. So the idea that, especially in New London, with 80% of our voters, being there and not participating, the idea that, my candidacy as a Green Party mayoral candidate is going to take all the voters away, or a large significant voters away from the Democrats, is silly. It's just so silly because my candidacy, that means I'm an opponent. So their staunchest supporters are going to make sure and show up for them. So I might be activating their voters in a way that they couldn't. And let's talk about the way that our leadership is activating our voters. They are not. They are activating their own supporters. That's different than our voters. Former Board of Education candidate Keith Kimball, in the last interview he was on in this show, made the point, he mentioned as he was talking, the phrase, "they got most of the votes," came out of his mouth. And I was like, you know what? There's something to that. This year, the Democrats did get most of the votes, but they did not get most of the voters. And those people still deserve a voice, they deserve recognition, they deserve somebody who will fight for them. And I'm not sure they have that, because I'm not sure that our leadership is so concerned with a high turnout, because they found a formula that works for them. When we talk about approaches, the logic that people use, I like to follow it until you can't anymore. So let's do that now. The New London Democratic Party started with X amount of voters active in New London. They won. The next time around, there are far less active voters in New London, and they won. Before the election, they didn't really work that hard to drive turnout, to increase voter interest. They want to play it safe. So the number of people that send them to power keeps getting smaller. And if they're okay with that in the last election, and they're okay with that in this year's election, and that's the logic they're following, when does that stop? When does that stop working? Because if they're going to keep doing that, then why can't I believe that they'll be fine with one active voter in New London showing up to pull the lever for them and sending them to power? Why can't it just be one? Because if you're gonna win an election in 2023 with almost 1,000 less voters and call it a mandate, then I can see you. I can see where you're going with this. And I cannot believe that you are interested in generating a higher voter turnout. I believe that you're fine with playing it safe so long as you stay in power.
Well, I want to note that
Change my mind.
I'm not going to. I'm not even going to try to
That's
change
what the
your
kids
mind.
say. That's what the kids say.
Yes, but 4 years ago, there were 3 official mayoral debates, and all 3 candidates for mayor showed up to all 3 of the debates. And one was the standard New London Day plus League of Women Voters debate. One was New London Landmarks, and one was the Neighborhood Alliance. And there was a little bit of controversy about whether the Democrats wanted to come to the Neighborhood Alliance debate because those people were not seen as being Democratic Party supporters and maybe even being antagonistic. But in the end, they did. All three mayoral candidates came to all three debates.
Because
And
it seems a little weird if you don't.
right, and you know what? Because there were these three debates and all the candidates were there, the reporters were there. The press was reporting on it.
Yeah.
There
Then the voters were learning about the positions that were stated during
Yes.
those debates.
So when we have, I don't remember what I calculated. I think on the Democratic side, their turnout was down by about 26%. Our turnout was down also, but only about maybe 15% down. So although you received fewer votes than Frida did 4 years ago, you had a higher percentage of the voting because of the turnout.
Of the low turnout.
Yeah. So
Hardly something to be
so,
proud of.
Yeah. So the lack of ability to get the information out just kind of trickles down. If you don't have the debates, and then you don't have the press coverage, and you don't have people talking about it in the coffee houses the next
Right,
day,
right.
The voters do not get a chance to really be informed.
Yeah, I was surprised by how many people were asking me in the days after the election, you know, if I'm ready for the election. And I'm like, it already happened.
Oh,
It already happened. Or a lot of people ask me when it was. But we know why that is, the reasons you stated, but also, and I can't stress this enough, our city looks and feels different. The numbers are there, so it's not wild speculation. This is an informed estimation here that I'm trying to make. And I never get tired of reminding people that our city leadership is building places for, defense contracting employees to live downtown. And I'm not sure, if I could paint with a broad brush here, pun intended, I'm not sure what their interest in the arts is. I'm not sure that I can picture them piling into our galleries, for openings. I'm not sure that I can get them to come to the VFW for poetry readings. I'm not sure that I can, but we're going to try, because those are the things that mean the most to us here in New London. And as they assimilate into our society, I'd like them to participate in those things more so that those institutions can last, so that those galleries can continue to do those and have those showings. And again, this isn't wild speculation. I remind you, I bartend twice a week downtown, at the Blue Duck. And, when it's busy in there on a Friday, it's always a good crowd in terms, no one's acting up. But I'm going to say 85% of the people in there are young white men. And it didn't always used to look that way. So why is it different? We all know the answer. We have to stop pretending that there's a stigma around this, or that it's a little taboo, or maybe it's a little weird or awkward to talk about. Talk about it. We have to acknowledge it.
Well, if those people are the ones who are moving into the new apartments, I'm glad to hear they're going to our local restaurants.
Oh, they're going to where they sell beer on draft. But I'm concerned about how much they want to pile into the Guard.
And I'm also
do they shop at the
interested
Annex?
in-
Are they going to go to Espressiones for a gallery opening?
And the other question is, are they going to go to the polls and vote in municipal elections?
No, because how unfortunate of the timing. We have to just speak frankly about it. They just showed up in the city. I don't know how politically active they are, but they just showed up in the city. They don't know our leadership by name. They have no idea what their policies are. And if you ask them how, if you got out of them some opinion of the municipality, the only connection they'd have to it is that this municipality is responsible for signing off on these developers to build these expensive apartments that I just moved into. And because I have expendable income and no family, right? I love my $1,600 studio apartment. I love New London. So yeah, I'll vote for the leadership if I vote. The timing is just, it hurt us. It really, really hurts us.
And there are ways to look to find out whether people at those addresses came out to vote or not, because I frankly don't know how many of them are thinking that in 5 years they'll still be living in New London.
Well.
Doubtless some will be, but
Right.
I don't know.
I'll spare you the trouble. They didn't. So yeah, I
We
mean,
try to be data driven though.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, you win some, you lose some, but there are more things to focus on. As a co-chair for the Arts Council, the work that I do to prop up the arts community in any way that I can, which first and foremost will always be by sticking as close as I can to the peers that I've had all along the way, these volunteers that make the Arts Council function, these individuals, someone like a Wendy Vincent who wears hundreds of hats at any given time, to run a local business, retail establishment in New London, but also to run something like the Cultural Coalition, and then find time to help, volunteer at an event or, come to a New London Arts Council meeting or host a New London Arts Council meeting. So work very closely with folks like that and stay in those circles and just try to do the work. There is more work to do in the sort of political arena, and that also includes outside of New London. I think the next slide that we have would be a SCORE logo.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about SCORE as a kind of contrast.
Yeah, so, all right. So this is an organization that I've been working more with in the last couple of months, I'll say. They're not new. A lot of institutions, organizations became way more active or formed after the brutal murder of George Floyd was witnessed by all. And this one is one of those organizations and has been busy all along. They didn't show up because it looks good and then stop working. They're active. And so one of the leaders of this group, Nikki DeSardo, is somebody that I worked with on PARJ, Public Art for Racial Justice Education. I'm hoping that your viewers that are from New London or the area will be familiar with the large mural in Fulton Park. Public Art for Racial Justice Education installed that mural. New London artist Marvin Espy painted it.
And he's getting a higher profile in New London all the time.
All along, right, he did. He just opened a gallery. And we love to see a black-owned gallery in New London. We had one called Cultured AF, run by Juanita Austin. That is gone away. We're glad to see another one open up. But Nikki DeSardo is somebody that I worked with on that Fulton Park mural, and we've stuck together, all along. And during the election this year, actually, I was invited by them to speak at a Hate Has No Home Here rally. That is the next slide, some images from that. And that was a really cool day. I love doing stuff like that type of work. You can't do enough of that type of work.
So this was held in Niantic, correct?
That was held in Niantic, right on the corner there, that main corner, just, if you can see on the bottom image, behind me, prominently featured in the middle there, is a pizzeria, and then behind that, I think it's a pizzeria, and then right behind that is what used to be the theater that is now a playhouse. Check them out. So this rally, I mean, let's be honest, doing work like this in an area like Old Lyme, East Lyme, Niantic, very important. And so I was happy with the turnout that showed up. And a funny little anecdote from that day, as soon as the microphone was put in my hands, before I could say anything, somebody drives around behind me screaming from his truck, "All lives matter, all lives matter," because he was reacting to the Black Lives Matter. I mean, you're not stupid. That's just guilt. It doesn't say only Black Lives Matter. It says Black Lives Matter. And if you feel some type of way about that, you'd shout something stupid like all lives matter. We agree with that.
Yeah.
We say Black Lives Matter to remind folks who think they don't that they do. So that's settled. But I just said thank you to him as he drove off in his pickup truck. So we had our rally, good turnout, great mix of people, a lot of different towns represented in the crowd. That makes me happy. But that rally was being held in reaction to some vandalism, swastikas being painted, signs being put up that were anti-Native American, and some anti-Semitic activity. And I thought, man, this work will never stop just yesterday, I saw it in passing, so I apologize, I can't give you the town, but please research it. I saw Senator Blumenthal giving remarks about a menorah that was desecrated or damaged. This was just yesterday. So I mean, this is the type of stuff that SCORE, deals with and reacts to. And so they are always looking for recruitment, so that's why I was happy to share their logo. Great group of people. Some of the leadership is quite young actually as well, which is very encouraging. So I'm happy to do more work with them. That work brings us to another very important subject. We didn't have to talk about Gaza today. We didn't have to talk about the Middle East. We didn't have to leave the country at all in our conversation.
Right.
But I'm telling you that I just gave a rally for an organization that was reacting to anti-Semitic behavior. Just yesterday, was there more of it? And so the world is all riled up now, understandably. So, it's all as relevant as it ever was. There's always going to be some form of hate or discrimination to react to. It's alarming. We all hear the stories, but to talk about that subject just briefly, I have to say I heard a very alarming number. In 20 years in Afghanistan, the United States of America killed less civilian bystanders than have been killed in Gaza in the last 2 months. I mean, that scale alone should just let people know what type of danger non-combatants are in that region. Did I say that as diplomatically as I possibly could?
Yeah, and I'll be less diplomatic because
Go for
no
it.
one's. I'm in a little bit of a position of privilege, but it's worse than you think because if people go to human rights organization, websites that are in Israel, these are Israeli organizations. They are inclusive, but they are Israeli founded. It isn't just Gaza, it's also in the West Bank.
Sure.
There has been I think about 100 people living in houses and small villages have been evicted from their homes in order for a new highway to be built. I was quite shocked. There's been a very heavy toll, not just of civilian deaths, which there have been, and it's a lot of more than half women and children, but journalists, which are, I suspect, targeted and not just innocent bystanders in the wrong place, although their job is to put them in the wrong place, in danger.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But when I at one point, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I thought, well, I wonder if more journalists have been killed or more like Hamas fighters have been killed. And to my amazement, the article that I found talked about 2 journalists and 1 Hamas fighter being killed in Lebanon,
Right.
not Gaza. This is the other end. And I found later on, when I lived in Israel, in a kibbutz that was very close to the Lebanese border, that whole region has been evacuated. Where I live was evacuated. I don't think that it's actually been targeted. I think
But it's close enough.
as in, I don't know, we were there in the 1973 war, and I had a newborn baby. I kind of was in my own little world. But the men who were on guard duty said they would see shells go over us and into the towns south of us. And it seems to me that it's more the coastal towns like Nahariya, which are in the northern part of the country, are being targeted more than the villages near the border. Our neighbors were Bedouin villages. So I don't know, but that whole, like a dozen communities have been evacuated out of that whole region. So it's not just one front, even though the world's eyes are mostly on that one front.
Yeah, there are, excuse me, You brought up reporters. Hearing about that too recently is something like 6 Israeli reporters have been killed to date, and 63, I think, Palestinian reporters have been killed. So it's just a crazy, unbalanced number.
And
It's hard. It's certainly very hard to ignore.
well, to bring this to New London a bit, I saw that Hearing Youth Voices, speaking of young people who actually give me a lot of hope for the future,
Sure, I
because
agree.
when I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, I don't think I had anything near the organizational skills or the awareness of the world around me that these young people have.
They're fired
They're
up.
very, and they, so they made a statement, which I have not read all of, but we in Connecticut, we in New London, and so much of the U.S. Has economic development tied towards the military-industrial complex. And to what extent are we culpable? Because we're not dropping the bombs, but we might be making the bombs.
Right. Yeah, putting some, your money where your mouth is, I guess. You said tying it to New London. I mean, I can draw a connection. The loss that's happening over there, which I teach my kids that war is always about loss. Whatever the outcome is, there was a loss of life, of money, of land. There was loss. War is about loss. And, over there, the reporters, it's just, no matter how many were lost on either side, what's more important than an informed electorate? And that's how we stay informed, by those people giving their life or risking their life to go and get that information so that we can have it, so that we can make decisions on how we're governed, because we want people to make decisions that are in power, that will be in our best interest. That's always how the system has worked. Choosing to not debate is a very big way to make sure that your electorate is uninformed. And to me, that's dangerous. And it's simply not election etiquette. The idea, the concept of a campaign without debating makes my stomach hurt. It should make everyone's stomach hurt. And heretofore is not something that I can say I've heard of. And so to go back to those numbers and tie it all together, 3 debates with all 3 candidates drove turnout. No debates definitely contributed to less of a turnout. And if you're the ruling class, you're the party in power, and you're running for re-election, that is a benefit to you. And you don't have to assume that they wanted it to be that way, but I'm not assuming. I'm in New London politics, and I know they didn't want it that way.
Well,
I know they didn't want a debate.
And it's a little bit of a quibble that there weren't exactly no debates. Hearing Youth Voices did hold a debate.
They held a candidate forum
Oh.
where candidates give answers but are not expected to rebut each other. And that is an important distinction to make. It's an important distinction to make, because if I was able to debate Mayor Pazaro, we wouldn't just be answering questions. He'd be answering a question and I'd be able to respond to it.
But part of the problem was that was not well attended by any incumbents, I don't think.
Right.
And Jeff Hart isn't exactly an incumbent. He was an incumbent Board of Ed member who was elected to City Council, and he did show up.
And we're grateful to him for
And
that. Because he bucked the system in a real way. Because again, I'm not a lay person. I know those conversations. I was in some of those conversations, and I was told that the official stance was the candidates were not going to debate because of the organizers of the debate being who they were. And then Jeff Hart showed up. So what is it? Are you lying over here, or are you not able to keep your candidates in order? Because you told us no candidates and one showed up. So either way, you don't have it together.
Yeah.
But I have some good news that we can move on to.
Okay, yeah, because we only have 5 minutes. So we got 5 minutes of good news at the end.
All right, so the next slide, I believe, is Step Up New London. So Step Up New London is a local organization that is committed to equality and inclusivity. I don't want to, I put up stepupnewlondon.com so that people can go to their website and learn more about them. But I know on my own experience, I won't try to recite their mission statement. I encourage folks to go read it. Is that they're doing all they can for the underprivileged in New London. color of their skin be damned. And that's why I like Step Up New London. Because they're doing what they can for the folks that need somebody to help them. And the good news that I have is that on Saturday, December 23rd, I am going to be playing Santa Claus
Oh, wow.
at an event.
Okay, I did not see that one
I
coming.
know. I wanted to break some ground with Your Honor. I'm going to be playing Santa Claus at an event at OIC from about 12 to 4. Just a chance for the kids to come out. There'll be some little snacks and stuff. But yeah, that's my surprise announcement. I'm going to be playing Santa Claus at OIC on the 23rd. And I have to tell you, I feel like a grown-up now. Because like I said to Trina Charles, who is one of the directors of Step Up New London, very, very passionate New London citizen, that there's definitely an age in a person's life where you just wouldn't consider asking them to play Santa Claus. Rana, I'm not in that stage anymore. Somebody asked me to play Santa Claus. And
You've outgrown the
I
too
said,
young to be Santa.
I hope it's the white hair in my beard and not the bowl full of jelly that makes you think that I can play Santa Claus. But yeah, so Step Up New London, been active all along, and I do stuff with them here and there, but give them a little shout out there. Always active at the holidays. They fed so many people at Thanksgiving. As part of my day job at Q105, I went to help them at their Toys for Tots toy drive-through, which was a great success. It was right in the parking lot of OIC, and 1,000 people didn't show up, but they got 4 big boxes of toys, which is what we were there to do. We filled up every big box we had from Toys for Tots.
Great.
That's a success story, and an organization in New London did that. So they deserve recognition for that, and they are organizing the event to come see Santa on the 23rd. So the next slide, just to mention 2 things. I think this is the Arts Council meeting. We can go over this really quick. This is the last meeting that we had. It was hosted by Wendy Vincent at the Golden Owl on Golden Street, 19 Golden Street. And this is our last meeting, but I just wanted to show this as like a little bit of a taste of the group. You can see in the center there is Emma Pelzier-Ray. She comes from theater. She is my fellow co-chair on the Arts Council. Wonderful person, really great leader. So I just wanted to show this because this group and more will be attending a strategic planning session in January. The date is to be determined, but that's something that I want folks to go to newlondonartscouncil.org to just follow up on. We've got a lot of events coming up, and that's where you can find out all the information. And the last event I'd probably bring up in the last 2 minutes is December 16th. Saturday, December 16th here in New London. We're having a Santa shopping stroll. It's citywide. It is a chance to highlight our retail establishments, a chance to highlight local artists because a couple of different places that aren't retail establishments will have art for sale for the holidays, including the Telegraph. And most importantly, the first 200 people to show up are going to get Santa hats that say New London on them.
Oh, wow. And since you mentioned the 16th, I'll spend 15 seconds or so to tell people that also on December 16th in the morning from 10 to 12, Riverside Park Conservancy is having a seed ball making program at the Fresh Conference Room on the corner of Cottage and Broad Street.
Yeah.
And for more information, there's a Facebook event at the Riverside Park Facebook site or the website. So
Cool.
Thank you, Eddie.
Wide range of topics, huh?
Yeah, and people can find out more about New London Arts Council, of course, by going to your website, newlondonartscouncil.org.
Correct. You nailed it.
Okay. So thanks again, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks. It does feel